So we are going to talk today about API testing and how to include our API test into a CI/CD pipeline. So my name is Fran Guerrero. So here you are my contact details. Normally I'm working as a QA manager or lead, but I like to be more like a QA coach. So I've been working in QA more than 12 years right now. I'm very passionate about agile methodologies, testing, of course, DevOps, automation. So if you want to contact me, you can add me to LinkedIn or contact me by Twitter, or it's up to you. Okay, so today we are going to talk about 3 blocks. The first one is going to be API testing and Postman. So I think Postman is one of the most used tool for API testing. And sometimes we think that with Postman, we can only do some manual tests over our APIs, and that's not the reality because we can integrate these tests in a lot of more tools, like, for example, executing them automatically with Newman, or even executing them using Docker and executing my Postman test in Postman container. Also, finally, we are going to talk about a third block related to the CI/CD pipelines. We are going to use, in this case, GitlabCI tools. And we are going to see how to easily integrate our Postman tests into GitlabCI. So, sometimes QAs are afraid of automation or technical stuff, but you can see through this talk that it is very, very easy to integrate our Postman tests in these tools and get more in contact with the DevOps world, and of course, performing more continuous testing in our companies. Okay, so let's start. So I'm not talking too much about the API definition. I think this picture is quite clear. So basically, APIs is a middle layer between the backend and the frontend. It's taking information from the backend and giving it to the frontend, or just receiving some requests from the frontend and communicating through the backend. So I think this picture is quite clear, so you can understand, and probably you are already familiar with APIs. Okay, so I would like to talk a bit about the pyramid of testing, or pyramid of automation. So ideally we should have more tests in the base of this pyramid. So I'm talking about unit tests, and less tests at the top of the pyramid, UI or end-to-end. The reason behind that is because at the top of the pyramid, the tests are slower, they are more expensive, and the maintenance is costing too much. But sometimes companies are focusing only on UI tests and unit tests, even having more of UI than unit. But they are forgetting several times about API tests or service tests. This middle layer is quite important because we can have a very good complementary coverage here. So we can rely more on API tests and testing more edge cases, negative cases in this layer, and we can free the UI layer of too many heavy test cases. Okay, so first of all, Postman. Talking about the Postman, Postman is a tool that it is acting as a client. So that way we can communicate with a server through the API without having the interface or the UI of this application. So, for example, if you are using application like Spotify or even web application, so they have an interface, an UI, and you are just clicking buttons, doing some actions in the web page, and all these actions are performing some request to the API, and this is communicating with the server and getting a response. So Postman, it is acting like a client, and you don't need to have the UI developed. So if, for example, you are working with a team and you need to test your API or your backend, you don't need to wait until the backend is finished. Sorry, until the front end is finished, because you can use Postman and making some requests and performing this API testing through this tool. I think Postman is one of the most known tools. So I'm going to stop a bit explaining the principal things of Postman, but basically I'm going to show in the application. So you can have Postman web application, or you can just download the desktop application. And through this application, you can perform your requests to your API. So for example, this is an API. This is a testing API. It's called Rick and Morty API, and I have been creating here a collection of requests. So this request, for example, is for getting all the character in the TV series. This second request is for getting just a single character, and we can perform some manual testing through Postman, just writing the endpoint here. Of course, selecting the proper method. We are getting information, so these are going to be get methods. And for example, I'm getting here the character number 1. So if I send this request, I'm going to get my response. I should get my response. Okay, now you can see I'm getting the response. The first character, of course, is Rick. You can see here with the ID number 1. And you can see that I'm getting a lot of information about this character, the gender, the species, the origin, the location, the episode that this character is appearing. Okay, so I can just validate this information by checking it manually, but the purpose is getting some automated tests and doing this validation automatically. So Postman has here a tab, you can see test. And here, using JavaScript, you can define some automated tests that they are very useful for checking or validating this data, or just verifying the proper behavior of this request. So in this case, I'm having here 3 Postman automated tests. So one for checking the status code, that it is 200. So the request is getting successful response. The second one is validating the response, is validating some data in the response, and just validating the name field that should be equal to Rick, just to make sure that the response is containing the proper information. And the third one is a non-functional test, because I'm checking that the response is, the system is responding in less than 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, so these tests are going to be executed every time that I send this request. So when I'm sending this request again, I'm getting the response as we saw before, but I'm getting also the result of the test. You can see here the test result, and all these 3 tests are passing. You can see. So if I write some automated tests in this tab, I'm not only making a request, I'm also testing my API. So Postman is giving us some cool solution about automated testing. So for example, if I have a collection with a lot of requests, I'm not just sending all the requests one by one. I can just clicking here on my collection, and I can check here that we have an option that it is called run collection. If I click on run collection, I can select all the requests that they want to run, and I can run all my collection. So this action is executing all the requests, and it is also executing all the automated test cases that I have. So for the second request, if you remember, we have 3 test cases, they are passing. For the first request, I only had 1 test case. It is passing as well. And we can see all the result here. So you can see Postman is a very easy tool to make requests to our API and performing some automated tests. But we are going to see some other tools so we can just get more advantage of this functionality. So before moving forward, I would like to show you that this collection, with all these requests and all these test cases, you can share this collection, or you can export this collection and download it locally to your computer. So for example, if we want to share, we can get here in this option via API, we can have a public link. So this is going to be a public link to our collection. So I can call this link with Newman, for example, or even within a Docker, and I can run this collection inside containers or even from a pipeline. So we will see later. Also, as I said, we can download this collection to my computer. So if I export my collection, I can just export to my computer and download my collection. So these two ways are going to be very useful for us. Let's continue with the presentation. Okay. Okay, this is a quick summary of all the section that we have seen before, the test section, and also the test result section. Okay, as I said before, we can run the collection through Postman, but for example, we have Newman. Newman is a framework that allows us to run our collection even without using Postman. So from a from a command line or a terminal, we can just install Newman. Of course, you have to need Node installed, but if you run this command npm install -g Newman, you can install Newman, and once once you have Newman installed, you can run your collection, as I said before, using two ways: using using the path to the collection that you downloaded before, and also running through the public link that you got from the share option in your collection. So let's see an example on the terminal. I hope you can see. I'm trying to put this a bit bigger, so you can see. Okay. Okay, so I'm here on my line command, and I want to run my collection without opening Postman. So I'm using Newman, okay. And the command is quite easy. You just have to use Newman run and the name of your collection if you have downloaded to your computer, or the public link if you want to point to the public link. If I execute this command, this is going to execute all my requests and all the test cases automated associated to this request. As you can see, I can see here all the test cases and the result for the test cases. So it's a quite easy tool. So if you need to run your collection test cases at some point and you don't have to, or you don't need to use Postman, or you don't want to use it, you just can install Newman and run your collection using Newman. Okay, so this is the first step because we are moving to the next tools, and we need to understand this very well to understand how to use it through the next tools, like Docker, for example. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Okay, as I said, these are the commands. They are very easy, and this is a screenshot. We just see it in the demo. And the next tool I want to talk is about Docker. So we can also execute these collections, these requests, and these automated API test cases in a container. Okay, this is not a talk about containers, about Docker. So we can be talking about Docker for hours. So I'm just giving a brief summary about Docker. So Docker is a kind of container where you have your resources, let's say, independent from your local machine, and you can execute your application and your test cases through these containers. This is giving us some advantage. So, for example, running parallel test cases, performing integration and end-to-end test. It is faster to build. It is very clean because you're not installing too much stuff on your local machine. You are just installing the things in the container that you need. Through here you have a summary of a lot of Docker command that you can have, but we are focusing right now in the just running a container with Newman. So the trick here is just trying to download a container. So as you know, Docker have a lot of containers in the Docker Hub. Docker Hub is kind of repository with Docker with images that they already have installed some tools or application in that images. So, for example, if we need a container to run Postman test cases, we should install a Postman Newman image from the Docker Hub. But running only this command, if you don't have that image in your machine, this is going to download the image. So don't worry about downloading in the Docker Hub. You just need to run this command in your command line. So running docker run -t and the name of the image, of course, and the URL to your collection. This is going to execute the collection. So let's see in the command line how to do it. Okay. Okay, here you have the command. It's docker run -t postman /Newman run and the public link to my collection, as you can see here. If I execute this command, this is going to run my collection, but no, this is not running in my local machine. This is running in a container. The first time that you do that execution is going to download the container. The container is containing Newman already installed, and the Postman collection is being executed inside this container. And you can see the results are quite similar as the previous execution that was on my local machine. So this execution was done on my local machine, and this one has been done in the container. This is not my local machine. This is a container, of course, within my laptop, but it is a container with their resources and independent from my local machine. So as you can see, it's quite easy to execute your automated test cases for API using Docker. So of course, you need to have installed Docker and then just use this Docker run command and pointing to the proper container. This is going to download your container and execute your Postman collection in that container. So it's quite easy. You can think that it is a DevOps thing or DevOps stuff using Docker or something like that, but it's really easy for a QA to use it. So I hope you can learn from this and you can use it in your day. Okay, so let's move forward. Okay, just again, as I said before, you have this container in the Docker Hub. You can download and pull it from the Docker Hub if you want, previous to executing your Postman collection. But as I said, just running this Docker run command is going to do all the thing for you, and it's going to download the image and run the collection. You can look in this link for the container if you are curious about. You can not only use a Postman Newman container. For example, if you are running Cypress tests, you can look for a container containing Cypress, and you can download it and do similar stuff to execute your Cypress test, for example. Okay, the results are quite similar when I'm executing on my local command line. And let's move to the third block, that it is the more important from my point of view. So let's talk a bit about CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. You know, QA is getting closer to the DevOps roles, to DevOps tasks. So we need to understand what is CI/CD, what's meaning, how to integrate our test cases in these CI/CD pipelines, and of course, we need to integrate as well our API test cases. So basically, CI/CD is meaning continuous integration and continuous delivery. When I'm talking about continuous integration, it's integrating a small amount of code and testing it through unit tests or component tests. Also creating an artifact, creating an application and storing it in a Nexus or Amazon or S3. And this is the part of continuous integration. When we are talking about continuous delivery, is getting this artifact, getting this application, installing it in a testing environment, like could be a staging or pre-production, and performing more tests, performing tests like end-to-end, regression, API, and different kind of tests in this phase. The the latest stage it is continuous deployment, but this is not quite usual. This is automating deploying the application to production if the previous phases went well. So if the continuous integration, continuous delivery is working fine, I can program my pipeline to automatically deploy to production, but this is not quite usual because a lot of approval are needed to deploy to production. So basically, when we are talking about CI/CD, we are referring to continuous integration and continuous delivery. So here, this is a standard pipeline. Of course, the pipelines can have several stages, several more phases. We are focusing on the typical ones. So basically, we are starting in the source code and the version control system. That could be GitHub, GitLab, and this is when my code is entering the development team is introducing code in the version control. This is triggering the pipeline. This is an automated process that it is including test cases, as you can see. Of course, automated test cases, and this trigger is just launching the build system, is building the application, and then running the unit test or integration component integration test. And as I said before, creating an artifact and storing the artifact in an artifact repo. So this part, all this part in the top, it is the continuous integration. So this should be performed automatically when the code is changing. Okay, and the second part, it is the deployment of this artifact in an environment. This is called a continuous integration environment or staging environment or pre-production environment. And when the application is deployed in this environment, more tests are executed. So in this part, we are executing, for example, our API test from Postman, our Cypress test for end-to-end, regression, performance, whatever. And finally, if everything is okay, I can deploy to the production environment. So this is a simple schema of a normal or standard pipeline. I think most of the QAs are thinking that this is DevOps stuff, but the QA should be involved in this and should be work together with the DevOps, just telling him, hey, please, after the build, introduce my unit test cases. After deploying to a staging, let's run our Postman collection, and we need to help them to introduce this script in the pipeline. Okay, for this talk, I selected GitlabCI tool, and this tool is going to help us to modify our pipelines to introduce our API test and run our Postman collection in the pipeline. So GitlabCI is a very cool tool because the continuous integration, it is integrated in the GitLab environment. So you have your code, the repositories, and all the pipeline stuff together in the same place. Okay, so let's see in the reality. Okay, so this is a repository on GitLab. Okay, and this repository, as you can see, is containing my Rick and Morty Postman collection, as you can see here. So I just exported my Postman collection and I push it to my remote repository. So now that I have my Postman collection here, I can also have my Cypress test, my application, more code here, but this is only the example is only pointing to the Postman collection. I can create a pipeline. Okay, so the way that GitlabCI is managing pipeline is through this file. So this file is called .gitlab/ci YAML file, and in this file, I'm defining my pipeline. Okay, so you can think that it is quite difficult, but it is quite easy, in fact. So, for example, this pipeline is quite easy because it's just containing a sample stage that it is for testing. Of course, a complete pipeline should include building, deploy, test, different test phases like end-to-end, API or unit tests. But this piece of code is just focusing on the Postman collection that we want to execute. So first of all, we need to define this file, and we should integrate this script in the file. So imagine that this pipeline should be bigger, but we can just include this stage related to the Postman test, and this is going to execute my Postman collection. So how can we do it? So basically, defining the stages. This is going to be only one stage called test, and then my job. My job is going to belong to the test stage, and is going to use, because GitlabCI is using Docker container for executing the pipeline. So I'm specifying here the name of the container that I want. So basically, I want a container with Postman Newman already installed. Okay, and then my script. The script is quite easy. So this just displaying some text, and here I'm just checking that Newman is installed by checking his version, and then again displaying some text, and I'm installing here a reporter. This is an extra thing. This is an optional step. This is to get an HTML report at the end of the execution, so I can send this report to my project manager or to my manager or whatever. But the important thing is here. So basically, my script is just doing the first command that we learned before, is Newman run, and the name of my collection that it is stored on my remote repository. So this is going to execute my collection the same way that I did in my command line in my local machine. Okay, so finally, as I'm generating a report, I'm saving this report in the artifact as an artifact in this path that we can check it after these API tests are executed and are run. So let's see. So for example, now GitLab changed the interface, and the section for CI/CD is now called build. And you can see here in build, we have pipelines, okay? And through here, you can run your pipeline manually. So this pipeline is going to be executed two ways. The first one is when the code is changing, automatically the pipeline is going to be triggered and is going to be executed. And the second one, we can trigger this pipeline manually through this section by clicking Run Pipeline. So if I click on Run Pipeline, and I run my pipeline, this is going to start the execution. And this is my job. You can see the status is running at this moment. It shouldn't take too long. We can see, if I click on the job, we can see the output of the console of the GitlabCI and what it's doing. So right now it's getting the Docker image containing Postman Newman. Let's wait for some seconds. Okay, now it has been quick, as you can see. We can check here. So basically, this was run on this Docker through the GitlabCI tool. So these were the commands that they were using, just displaying some tests, checking the version, installing the reporter, and later on running my collection, as you can see here. So when I'm executing, the pipeline is executing this command, again, the Postman collection is run. All the requests are performed. We can check here the status, and also we can check the test cases they are passing, like you can see here. We have a summary at the end, as you can see. And of course, I configure my pipeline to get an artifact with the report. So the artifact is stored here. So you can check at the right side. You have the job artifacts section. You can browse this section, and you can check the report here. Let's see. Okay, here is it. So it's not so fancy, but you can check the results. And this is a summary. You can get here all the requests with the test cases passing, the second request with the 3 test cases passing. And this is a report that you can send to your team lead or whatever. Okay, so basically, as you can see, it's quite easy to get your automated test cases from Postman and executing them from a command line using Newman, from a container using also a Docker Newman image, and from a pipeline just using the previous tool and configuring the pipeline in an easy way. Okay, so okay, these are the things that we have been seeing. And this is the result of the pipeline. So to sum up, as you can see, we are building this, let's say this methodology or this way to integrate my API test on the GitlabCI step by step. So first of all, I need to understand Postman and how to make collection with automated test cases and how to run them even using Newman through a command line. So this is the first step. So the second step is to understand that I can have a Docker image containing Postman Newman, and I can also execute my Postman collection through this Docker container. And the third one step is just to know that configuring the GitlabCI YAML file, I can execute this Postman collection and integrate the execution of my automated Postman test cases in a pipeline, in a CI/CD pipeline. So even if you are not using some other frameworks like REST Assured or Request from Python or whatever, you can also integrate your Postman automated test cases in a GitlabCI CI pipeline. So I chose GitLab, but you can use Jenkins or any other CI/CD tool that you prefer. GitHub Actions is the same way. You can perform the same way, the same thing that we have been doing here. So here you have the summary. So to finish my talk, I would like to talk about some extra perks, because probably some of you are questioning about how can I synchronize my Postman collection with my repository? How can I modify my Postman collection if I'm working in my Visual Studio code tool, for example, or even if I can perform more load testing using Postman through to my APIs. So first of all, this is a benefit that I want to share with you. You have the step here if you want to try it. There is a integration the Postman with GitLab. So if you create a new project in GitLab and you just create a personal access token, in Postman you have an integration with GitLab, an option. So in Postman you can select integration, choose GitLab integration, authenticate with your personal access token, and then you are going to have your GitLab repository totally synchronized with your Postman collection. So if you make a change in your Postman collection, it's going to be synchronized with your repository automatically. So this is a quite interesting integration. You can try it because it's quite useful. So you can work on your Postman client without worrying about your repository, because it's going to be synchronized automatically. The second benefit I want to talk is about the Postman Visual Studio Code extension. So imagine that you are coding in Visual Studio and you don't want to have different tools or too many tools. So you can have this Postman extension on Visual Code from the marketplace of Visual Studio. You can download it and you can check your request the same way that you do in Postman, but in the Visual Code tool. So you just are using one tool, Visual Studio, and you can check your collection and your request the same way that you can see them in Postman, modify them or executing them the same way. So that way you don't need to download Postman. You just have this Postman extension in your Visual Studio Code and you can perform the same actions. So it's quite interesting as well. And finally, the third perk benefit that I wanted to talk is about Postman Canary. Postman, when you are executing your collection, has released now a performance section, performance tab, and from here you can configure some virtual users, some ramp up test cases, some test duration, and you can perform some load tests through your request and your API. It's quite interesting. I invite you to try it, and that's it. Okay, so finally, before question time, I would like to remind you that testers don't break the code, they break the illusion about the code. This is my favorite sentence. And that's it all from my side. So I would like to thank you all for your time. And now, if you have any questions, just please let me know and I can answer you.
Great. Yes, we do. And thank you for that really informative session. I think we all understand a bit more about the CI/CD pipeline with API testing as you explained it. So we got one question from Laura. Laura says that running API tests in parallel to make the testing process faster is pretty common, but it can make it hard to manage multiple test executions and make sure that they don't interfere with each other. What is your advice to help with that?
Yes, so my advice here, I think the basis is to make your test cases as independent as possible from each other. So I know that sometimes, especially in API testing, and let's say HTTP request, we are getting, we are expecting a response to get some data to perform the following test. So sometimes it's difficult to get that independence from each other. But I would group these test cases in a thread of execution, and I perform other threads with different requests and performing. So, you know, nowadays it's quite usual to get your application using microservices because, you know, monoliths are getting old and companies are switching to microservices architecture. So it's better to focus on each microservice in a different thread. So that way you can parallel your execution. And of course, if you need to use mocks, you have to use it as well. So that's my advice.
Okay, great. And the second question we have is about more testers taking part in the testing process. It seems there's a question about how things have shifted over time. More testers are taking part in the process where they used to not be involved in that so much. What do you think is going to happen in the future? Do you think that's going to continue to grow? Do you think it might stabilize? Where do you see things from your perspective?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. The question is about more testers being involved in the CI/CD method of working, basically, that it used to be a lot less, and it's not their participation has only grown over the years. Do you think that that's going to continue to grow?
Yeah, I think it's going to be growing in the next years, because at the end, I think it's a normal evolution of the QA role. So at the beginning, we were totally separated from the team, working as a separated team and just testing the application at the end. So with the Agile methodologies, we got integrated into the team, working more with the product owners and developers and the rest of the team. And now, some years ago, we started to work closer to the DevOps and participating in the deployment stuff and worrying about the environment. So I think it's the normal evolution of the QA role. So we are getting more and more involved into the DevOps stuff. So it's very, very important to understand all these things, to know how to integrate our test cases in the pipelines and participate with the DevOps in all these things.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we're seeing that on our side of things as well. Testing is evolving and it's no longer siloed. And as you said, with Agile methodologies, everyone's just, really growing in their role. And that's great for career advancement as well in this industry. Okay, if those are all the questions for now, if there are more that pop up later, I'll be happy to pass them your way.
Sure.
And thank you, Fran, for your incredible presentation.
Thank you.